You are driving, or you are doing dishes, or you are half watching something on your phone while the coffee gets cold. A podcast, a news segment, something you did not choose on purpose. The host says, Cosmic Airburst, Bronze Age, Jordan Valley, and your hand does not move toward the skip button, not because you are interested in airburst physics, because you hear the word that comes next, Sodom, and something in you, older than your skepticism, older than the decade you stopped going to church, reaches for that word before you can think about it. You know that word from somewhere deeper than your memory. Sunday school, maybe. Or your grandmother's Bible. Or the image that came with the story before you were old enough to evaluate it. Fire from a clear sky. A city burning overnight. A woman looking back, turning to salt. A plane falling silent. You have carried that image for 30 years or 40, without examining it, without being asked to. It was just there, filed under things you were taught before you could choose. And now a podcast host is saying, in 2021, a peer-reviewed paper in Nature Scientific Reports described a Bronze Age destruction layer in the Jordan Valley, with physical signatures consistent with a catastrophic thermal event. And then something happened to the paper. And then the researchers came back with more data. The image in your head, fire from the sky, city gone, plane silent, is about to become more precise, not less dramatic, more precise. And it has been waiting 3,600 years for the right vocabulary to arrive. My name is Nathan, former high school history teacher, Evansville, Indiana. 12 years at a Catholic school teaching world history and early Christianity. I resigned when the evidence kept leading me somewhere the institution was not prepared to follow. I want to tell you how I found this, because I was not looking for Sodom, I was following abandonment data. That is a dry way to describe it, but it is accurate. I had been reading the excavation reports for the southern Jordan Valley, the Bronze Age occupation sequence specifically. Who was there, when, and who was not there after? The Jordan Valley in the Middle Bronze Age was densely settled. Farmland, trade routes, cities built on centuries of prior cities, and then, in the stratigraphic record, in the layers of soil that archaeologists read like a timeline, the settlements stop. Not just one or two, an entire regional occupancy sequence, interrupted, beginning approximately 1650 BCE, lasting 3 to 6 centuries, 3 to 6 centuries of agricultural silence in a region that had been continuously inhabited. That kind of gap does not happen by coincidence. It does not happen because of drought or politics or gradual migration. It happens when something makes the land itself stop working. I was trying to understand what that something was when I found a paper from 2021. I printed it, I sat down with a coffee, and for the next 3 hours I did not move. The paper was published in Nature Scientific Reports. 21 authors, 10 institutions, peer-reviewed. Its title, A Tunguska-sized airburst destroyed Tall el-Hammam, a Middle Bronze Age city in the Jordan Valley near the Dead Sea. Tall el-Hammam, that was a name I did not know. I needed to. Tall el-Hammam is located in the southern Jordan Valley, northeast of the Dead Sea. Dr. Stephen Collins of Trinity Southwest University began excavating it in 2005. He has been digging there for 15 years. It is the largest Bronze Age city in the Jordan Valley, a site with a palace complex, temples, dense residential neighborhoods, storehouses, surrounded by a defensive rampart. At its height, home to several thousand people. Collins also did something that made mainstream archaeology uncomfortable. He formally identified Tall el-Hammam as the biblical Sodom, not as a speculation, as a conclusion based on the geography of Genesis 13. Here is what Genesis 13 says about the location. Lot stood on the hills near Bethel and Ai, hills on the western edge of the Jordan Valley. He looked out. He saw the plain of Jordan, the well-watered plain, all of it. He chose the cities of the plain. Stand at Bethel today. Look east. The southern Jordan Valley spreads out before you. Tall el-Hammam is there at the northeastern edge of the Dead Sea. The geography fits. The scale fits. The Bronze Age occupation dates fit. Mainstream archaeology has rejected the identification. Not on the basis of contradictory evidence, on the basis of an institutional rule. Archaeological sites should not be named after biblical places. That rule has a logic. It is a safeguard against motivated scholarship, against researchers who want the Bible to be true and go looking for evidence to confirm it. But it also means that the physical evidence at el-Hammam has been managed within a disciplinary context that has no interest in connecting it to a text describing the same location in the same language. Two institutions, same valley, same destruction event, no conversation. I was not yet certain what I was holding, but I could see that the 2021 paper was unlike anything I had read. You are in the Jordan Valley, not now, 1,650 years before the Common Era. The morning is ordinary. Merchants moving through the city gate with goods from the trade routes, women at the water jars, children, the smell of baking bread and animal dung and river mud, and under everything, the salt of the Dead Sea to the south. The city is large by every standard available to you. The rampart walls are higher than 3 men standing. The palace complex has columns. To the east-northeast, sky, clear sky, ordinary sky. You do not have a word for what is coming. In approximately 9 seconds, a thermal pulse will reach you from that direction at a temperature of approximately 3,800 degrees Celsius. You do not know this. You know only that something appears in the sky, something bright, something moving fast in a way that the sky is not supposed to move, and before you can name it, or run, or warn anyone, the pottery in the storehouses explodes from the inside out. The mud brick walls liquefy at the surface. The air itself catches. It comes from above, from heaven, in the only vocabulary you have. And for 3,600 years, that is the only vocabulary anyone will use. Until 2021, when 21 scientists described the same event in a different language. Both languages are pointing at the same moment. Here is what the 2021 paper documents. I want to go through this carefully because the evidence is specific, and specific evidence deserves specific attention. The first item, shocked quartz. Shocked quartz is a mineral that forms when normal quartz is subjected to pressures above 10 gigapascals. For context, 10 gigapascals is roughly 100,000 atmospheres. This pressure is achieved in 3 known scenarios. The first, underground nuclear weapons tests. The second, confirmed asteroid impact sites. The Chicxulub crater in Mexico, where the impactor that killed the dinosaurs left shocked quartz across a wide geographic area. The third, atmospheric airbursts, cosmic objects that detonate before reaching the ground. No fire caused by humans produces shocked quartz. No earthquake produces it. No volcanic event in the region could produce it at el-Hammam. The researchers found shocked quartz in the destruction layer. I am still sitting with that even now. The second item, pottery temperatures. The researchers analyzed ceramic fragments from the destruction layer. They found thermal signatures consistent with temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius. For comparison, a standard wood fire reaches approximately 600 degrees Celsius. A wildfire, up to 800 degrees. The melting point of bronze, approximately 950 degrees. The melting point of iron, approximately 1,500 degrees. The pottery at el-Hammam was heated to more than twice the melting point of iron, in seconds. The third item, a platinum group metal anomaly. Platinum group metals, platinum, iridium, osmium, are rare in the Earth's crust. They appear in elevated concentrations in cosmic material. At Chicxulub, there is a thin layer of iridium marking the impact event. The researchers found elevated platinum group metals in the destruction matrix at el-Hammam, a cosmic signature, in the same layer as the shocked quartz, in the same layer as the 2,000-degree pottery. The fourth item, nano-diamonds. Diamond-like carbon and nano-diamonds form under extreme pressure and temperature events consistent with cosmic airbursts. They have been found at multiple confirmed airburst sites around the world. They were found in the el-Hammam destruction layer. And the fifth item, the one that explains the 3 to 6 century agricultural silence I had been tracking in the occupation data. Salt. The destruction layer contains an anomalous salt concentration, geologically linked to the nearby Dead Sea, a salt-rich body that a powerful pressure wave could pick up and redistribute across the surrounding terrain. Salt at those concentrations makes agricultural soil functionally dead. For decades, possibly centuries, 300 to 600 years of regional abandonment, confirmed by independent stratigraphy, a destruction layer with salt concentration sufficient to explain it. 5 independent physical anomalies, 1 location, 1 event. The paper's conclusion: something non-human happened in that valley in 1650 BCE. Something for which the only Bronze Age vocabulary was brimstone, fire, the wrath of God. In April 2025, Nature Scientific Reports retracted the paper. I want to be very precise about what that means, because the headlines were not precise, and the imprecision matters. The retraction notice stated, "The claims that an airburst event destroyed Tall el-Hammam appear to not be sufficiently supported by the data in the article." The specific issue identified was the comparison between the Tall el-Hammam evidence and the 1908 Tunguska event. Tunguska happened in Siberia in June of 1908. A cosmic object, probably a small asteroid or comet fragment, detonated in the atmosphere with a force estimated between 5 and 15 megatons. It flattened approximately 2,000 square kilometers of Siberian forest. The 2021 paper had compared the Tall el-Hammam physical evidence to Tunguska's parameters. The retraction found those parameters, temperature estimates, wind speeds, blast modeling, had been overstated. The comparison was imprecise, so the paper was retracted. Here is what was not retracted: the shocked quartz in the destruction layer at Tall el-Hammam. Still there. The 2,000-degree temperatures in the pottery, still there. The platinum group metal anomaly, still there. The nano-diamonds, still there. The salt concentration, still there. The 300 to 600 year agricultural abandonment, confirmed by independent stratigraphy, still there. None of the physical evidence at the site was disputed by the retraction. What was disputed was one specific model for the mechanism scale, the Tunguska comparison. Several of the paper's authors formally objected to the retraction, including Malcolm LeConte and T. David Burley. Their objection was specific. The retraction addressed the comparison model, not the underlying site evidence. And then the research team did something. They came back. In 2025, an expanded version of the paper was published through Airbursts and Cratering Impacts at ScienceOpen. New data. They established blast directionality. They tracked decorated pottery sherds from individual vessels, fragments of the same pot, distributed across 22 meters and spanning 6 palace walls. That scatter pattern is consistent with the directional shockwave originating from the east-northeast. They refined their Tunguska comparison, directly addressing the retraction's methodological objection. They added hydrocode modeling, computer simulations of a proposed airburst at those coordinates, propagating across the valley. The physical evidence in the ground was never disputed. They addressed what was disputed and came back with the same conclusion and more data. You were told Sodom was a moral story. Sin, punishment, warning. A lesson about what happens to people who transgress. The fire was not meant to be examined. It was meant to be feared. You accepted that frame because it was the only one offered. But somewhere, in a Sunday school class or a church service or a quiet evening with Genesis 19 on your own, you noticed something. The fire came from the sky, not from the earth, not from a volcano or a fault line or an invading army. From above, the region stayed dead for generations, not for years, generations, and Lot's wife. The text does not say she was transformed metaphorically. It says she became a pillar of salt, a physical outcome, a specific transformation. The story was too specific for pure allegory. Invented moral parables do not specify mechanisms. They do not name the direction fire comes from. They do not describe centuries of agricultural failure. They do not include the detail that a nearby woman turned to salt. Something happened, and now you are reading the words shocked quartz in a peer-reviewed paper. Shocked quartz in the destruction layer of a Bronze Age city in the Jordan Valley, dated to approximately 1650 BCE. The church taught you what it meant. The physicists are telling you what it was. These are two different languages. They are not two different events. I was at a dinner about 8 months ago. A small gathering. 6 people, a colleague's home, a Friday in February. Informal, not professional. The person sitting across from me was a geophysicist, studies cosmic impact events at a state university. We had been introduced. There was wine. The conversation had moved through the usual places. At some point I mentioned that I had been reading the tall el-Hammam airburst literature. She put her glass down. She said, the retraction was about the Tunguska comparison. The temperature modeling was sloppy, but the site data itself is solid. Whatever hit that valley was extraordinary. That last sentence. Whatever hit that valley was extraordinary. This is a person who studies cosmic impact events professionally. Her professional judgment stated plainly, whatever hit that valley was extraordinary. I asked, what do you make of the SODOM connection? A pause. Not a dismissive pause. Not the kind of pause where someone is deciding how to be polite to a person who has said something naive. A genuine pause. The kind that happens when a question crosses a line you were not expecting to cross. She said, the Bible is not my area. I study impact events. I said, the site is in the probable location of the biblical Sodom. The destruction date overlaps with the biblical timeline. The physical signatures in the destruction layer match what Genesis 19 describes. Read as a literal physical account rather than as allegory. The retraction was about the Tunguska comparison model, not the site evidence. She held that for a moment. Then she said, I would not publish that framing. And then, but privately, something extraordinary happened there, what you call it. That is not a physics question. What you call it is not a physics question. I sat with that phrase for a long time afterward, because she had described with complete precision the war that makes this subject so strange. On one side, the physical evidence, shocked quartz, platinum group metals, 2000-degree pottery, salt deposits, 6 centuries of failed agriculture, all of it published, peer-reviewed, never formally disputed at the site level. On the other side, a name, a book, a tradition, a narrative that has organized the moral imagination of billions of people for 3,000 years. She was not dismissing the theology. She was pointing to the boundary of her domain. Her training stops at the edge of the physics question. What happened in that valley? Physics. What to call it? Not physics. And the church is standing at the same wall from the other side, equally unwilling to cross it, for different structural reasons. But equally at the wall, 2 institutions, same physical event, same valley, same ground. No conversation. Because the conversation would require both of them to acknowledge that they are managing 2 different vocabularies for the same record. The church manages the theological vocabulary. It has no institutional use for physical confirmation of Sodom, because physical confirmation raises physical questions. What killed those people? What mechanism? What does the wrath of God look like when you translate it back into physics? The answer, a cosmic airburst, is not incompatible with divine agency. A universe that operates through physical laws is not a universe without God, but an institution whose authority rests partly on the category of the miraculous has limited incentive to translate the miraculous into the physical. Mainstream archaeology manages the physical vocabulary. It has rejected the biblical identification of Tall el-Hammam on methodological grounds, the rule against naming sites after biblical places. And so the physical evidence in that destruction layer is managed within that framework. Fascinating anomaly, rigorous paper, retracted, republished, but the connection to a text describing the same event in the same location, in the same physical terms. That is not an archaeological question. That is a biblical studies question. And no one at the intersection of those 2 fields has institutional standing to raise it. The geophysicist told me exactly where the boundary was. She did not cross it. I kept thinking, then who does? J.J. Benitez does not address Tall el-Hammam. His Caballo de Troya series, 10 volumes published between 1984 and 2016, is set in 1st century Jerusalem. The Sodom event is 3,000 years before his narrative frame. But Benitez has spent 40 years arguing something specific, not something about Sodom. something about the methodology for reading ancient texts. He argues, in interviews, in essays across 4 decades of public engagement, that the theological vocabulary of the ancient world and the physical vocabulary of modern science are 2 different languages pointing at the same record. That what ancient witnesses called the wrath of God, or fire from heaven, or signs in the sky, corresponds to real physical events. Events that were understood only within the vocabulary available to the people who witnessed them. The people in the Bronze Age Jordan Valley who saw an airburst did not have the words thermal pulse, pressure wave, atmospheric detonation, shocked quartz, platinum group metal anomaly. They had brimstone, fire from the Lord out of the heavens, 2 vocabularies, 1 event. Benitez is not an archaeologist. He does not publish in peer-reviewed journals. His methodology in Caballo de Troya operates entirely outside the verification standards I apply to Collins or Kennett or anyone else in the peer-reviewed literature. I want to be clear about that. What I find valuable in Benitez is not any specific claim about Sodom. What I find valuable is the methodological question he has been asking for 4 decades. If the events described in ancient texts are real physical events, and if both vocabularies, scientific and theological, are pointing at the same physical record, what happens when you put both texts on the same table? The tall el-Hammam destruction layer is, as far as I have been able to find, the most striking test case for that question in the entire archaeological record. A destruction layer with 5 independent physical anomalies at a site in the probable location of biblical Sodom, dated to a period consistent with the biblical timeline, matching in its specific details fire from above, instantaneous destruction, salt deposits, centuries of regional silence. The physical description in Genesis 19 read not as moral allegory, but as eyewitness account, and 2 institutions standing at the wall between the 2 vocabularies, neither one crossing it. The geophysicist was right. What you call it is not a physics question, but the physics is in the ground. And somebody has to ask what the 2 vocabularies are pointing at. I am back at my desk. The Collins excavation reports are stacked on the left. The 2021 paper is printed and marked up. The retraction notice is in a folder. The 2025 expanded paper is open on my screen, and the text of Genesis 19 is open next to it. Verse 24, "And the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, not from the earth, from heaven, from above." An airburst, a cosmic object detonating in the atmosphere, produces fire that comes from above, not from below. The people who wrote that verse were describing what they saw from the ground. They used the vocabulary they had. They said, "from heaven." The physicists describing what left shocked quartz and platinum group metals and nano-diamonds in a Bronze Age destruction layer say, atmospheric detonation, different languages, same direction, same event. And verse 26, "But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt, a pressure wave picking up evaporate minerals from the nearby Dead Sea and depositing them across everything in its path, every surface, every body, everything that did not move fast enough would deposit salt." I am not telling you what to believe about divine agency. That question is not mine to answer for you. What I am telling you is that the physical description in Genesis 19 and the physical evidence in the tall el-Hammam destruction layer are describing the same event, in different vocabularies, with the same specificity. And those 2 texts have never been formally placed on the same table by anyone withstanding in both fields simultaneously. The Church teaches Sodom as moral allegory. Mainstream archaeology rejects the biblical identification on methodological grounds. Between those 2 institutional walls, the most physically documented event in the entire Genesis narrative, sitting in a destruction layer in the Jordan Valley, the shocked quartz is still there. The 2000-degree pottery layer is still there. The salt anomaly is still there. The 600-year agricultural silence is still there. The paper was retracted. The researchers came back with more data. The ground has not changed. And Genesis 19 verse 24 says, "Brimstone and fire from the Lord out of the heavens, not from the earth, from above." Think about that for a second. This is Nathan. Forbidden Gospels.